knows the rest? Tú sabes que te quiere ver morir. The shots are recognized. Who knows the rest? Touching you to feel if you're shot. Are you? Stop bleeding. I don't feel a bullet hole. Stop bleeding. You can't, so you bleed. Scaring me to death. Stop bleeding. I don't feel a bullet hole. Oh yeah, I do. I'm kicking my feet to kill this feeling, this memory. Who knows the rest? Me siento, me paro. No, me siento where? On the streets? No, I better stand up, right? Otra vez. In my head, all the screams that my lungs couldn't hold anymore. They're bouncing back and forth. Can you make them go away? I took a spoken word hip-hop class with Art Corp, and my teacher, he was like really good at explaining things, and I understood where he was coming from, and he understood my poetry. I wrote it because somebody I really care about was shot right in front of me, and that really messed up everything. So like when I started writing about it, that gave me a chance like to tell other people, this is how I'm feeling, listen to me, because I can't just deal with it by myself.
Brazilian dancing, there's African drumming, I mean, there's photography, there's
cultivate a generation of artists, even if they aren't practicing artists, but they're people who find that way.
When the school bell rings at the end of the day, some kids get to head home for milk and cookies. Others spend their hours in after-school clubs or playing sports, and some kids just hang out with their friends. As public school funding gets tighter, education officials channel the remaining dollars to classes that will prepare kids for standardized tests. The arts in particular have fallen victim to the cutbacks. The people behind the Seattle organization ArtsCorps think more young people should spend their time after school making art of all kinds. And they've managed to convince a lot of local kids that making art can be a cool thing to do. Lisa Fitzhugh is ArtsCorps' founder and executive director, and Amy Maguire started as a teaching artist and is still a teaching artist with ArtsCorps and is now the community development director of the organization. And we're surrounded by beautiful artwork, which is lots of fun to be here. Lisa, I know that you had the idea for this while you were working for former Mayor Paul Schell. What was the leap from working in a political department to working on ArtsCorps?
Couple things. One, I think, probably was a frustration working inside politics and it being always about inside baseball as opposed to real change. And I saw that my commitment to really making a difference in the community was only going to be made manifest by actually doing something in it, and rather than continuing to be in a sort of a political environment. So within my work with Paul, I knew and had come to know a lot more about the school district and what that was missing, and after-school environments and what that was missing, and just generally through a lot of the work that youth development organizations have done in Seattle, how disparate educational opportunities actually are for kids, especially ones without resources. But so that was part of it. But I also think it was just a personal inspiration, and my relationship to my mother, who's a professional photographer, who drove into me day in and day out the importance of telling the truth and the importance of art.
So the idea was, we're going to have an after-school program. It's going to be about art, and it's going to be for kids who can't necessarily afford to buy art classes.
Exactly. We did a lot of research into what there was available in terms of out-of-school arts education opportunities, and there is quite a bit if you have transportation, money, even just connections, frankly. However, if you're not in that world, if that isn't available to you, it's very difficult to find.
So what was the first actual ArtsCorps program? Did it start as big as it is now, or was it one school?
Yeah, not even close. We started in about 6 facilities, and they were primarily city-run community centers, since that's where my background was, and I had kind of first done my research in those areas, and I saw these brand new community centers that had been redeveloped in the last couple of years, and I thought, wow, these are great places for kids. Not enough is happening. Except for, a lot of recreational opportunities and but certainly not a lot of arts.
Meaning like sports.
Sports.
So, Amy, were you teaching during that first year of art school?
I started teaching in January. I didn't teach the fall quarter. I had artist friends who were telling me, there's this woman who's starting this thing, and you have to get involved. And I was like, yeah, I'm tired, And I just got off a film set. I don't want to do it. And like 4 different artists approached me, and finally I was like, fine. And I went to the first meeting, and at that point, all the artists had been chosen for the fall. And I just went to hear about it, and I went, I'm in. I don't care. I'm here to help you.
Had you been a teacher? You're an actor.
Actor. I was a casting director for 8 years. Director, theater person, film person.
But not a teacher.
I taught for the Orion Center. I taught for SYEP in the late 80s for 3 years, and did theater projects with street kids through IWASIL, Indian Street Youth Program, and the Orion Center.
So you sort of had an idea of what it would be like?
I certainly did. Yeah, I'd done it before, and then I spent 8 years in the film industry and kind of walked away from it. So it was a return to that.
So just nuts and bolts. You had these programs in community centers. They're free.
They're free to the kids.
So who pays for them?
The community centers, the facilities. And in fact, that's where there is some money that we've tapped, and it makes this great partnership. Everyone from the King County Boys and Girls Club to the YMCA to community learning centers, which are now funded partially by the federal government, all of whom are trying to make really rich learning environments after school, and so have programming money available. And we're tapping into that. So we ask that they match our teaching artist fee, and it ends up being a stronger partnership.
So they pay half?
They pay half of the fee that we pay our teaching artists, and we then raise money to cover all of the rest of it and all of our administrative costs.
So you had 6 community center after-school programs. How many do you have now?
Now we have
23.
23.
And they're not all in the city of Seattle. Where is there a general geographic area where they're located?
All in King County.
Primarily in South
And
though,
Central. We're in Renton. We're in SeaTac.
And it's really where, the most diverse communities are rapidly increasing in the region is in South King County. Renton, we'd have a program in Renton. It's definitely some of the most diverse and low-income demographics.
So I know Amy teaches drama because she was an actor, but I know that there's Brazilian dancing, and there's African drumming. I mean, there's photography, there's digital photography. There's quite a range of things. Does it depend on what teachers come, or how do you decide what the programs are?
Well, one of the ways that we approach the artists is, if you could teach whatever you wanted, what would it be? And so we compel them to bring their creative dream to the table and their creative vision to the table. And then we also, when we sit down with a site that wants to host a class, we say, what do you want? What's your top 3? If you could bring anything in here that you want. And then we start matching those artists with those facilities. And sometimes, if we don't have an artist that teaches what they ask for, we'll recruit that artist.
So is there an overlap? If you look at the 23 facilities, do the majority of them want music? Do they want drama? Do they want visual art? Is there one thing you could point to?
It's all over the map.
Really all over the
It's
map.
all over the map.
And they serve all different age ranges, too. Some really specifically want to serve their middle school kids. Some have a real desire to get teens more into their program. Some are exclusively elementary kids. And so that, in turn, really dictates what kind of classes you can offer as well.
And the other thing that we found, we're going to be in our 4th year in the fall. So in 3 years, a lot has happened, and we've learned a lot. And one of the original idea was that these classes were going to rotate. Every 8 weeks, an artist would move, right? And what ended up happening was an artist stayed in one place for a couple of quarters, and we realized, mentorship, the connection, that human connection that those kids make with that artist, and to have that sense of someone really recognizing them over time and having that relationship building. And so now, more and more, an artist will stay in one place for a year. Some artists will stay
multiple years.
Yes, I'll stay with Showalter until all my kids are in high school.
Well, I read a great article about you teaching, I think, was it it's the Seattle Urban Academy. And I wanted you to talk about that because it's a great description. The reporter had sat in, I think, maybe one of your first classes. So talk about that class and how you approached it initially and what you learned.
Well, Seattle Urban Academy was I walked in, I hadn't taught in quite a while, coming from that very sort of, artists live in a rarefied world, especially if that community is where you're close to. And so walking into a room of, predominantly African-American youth, and I'm like, here, got my little candle, we're going to have a moment, and they looked at me and like, right, yeah, what are you going to do with that candle? What are we going to do, have a seance, And, I mean, they pretty much ate my lunch, and I had to absolutely rethink everything about the way that I teach to come into their world at their level. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life.
Was that the first class that you taught for Arts Corps?
For Arts Corps, yeah. And I stayed there for 2 years. As I became an administrator, I could not give them the kind of time and dedication. Those kids needed a lot of extra time. And I felt that I could no longer really dedicate that because the program was growing so fast. And then I, came on as facility coordinator. So,
well, so do you guys provide training for artists who are teachers, or do they have to have pretty hardcore teaching experience to do this?
All of them, as they come in, really need to have exceptional experience, especially in an after-school environment, which is different than anything else and needs much more in terms of classroom management skills. There are teaching artists that come to us, though, at different levels, and all of our teaching artists start out now at sort of paying them at a lesser level until we're really sure they can graduate kind of up to the level that a lot of our other teaching artists are at. And I think that, and we offer 3 professional development workshops a year where we bring experts in learning assessment and diversity issues in to talk about and really help the Corps expand their set of skills.
How many teaching artists do you have now?
36 teaching artists on the roster. And the bigger the better, because then we have more options over time. And we have this great interconnected community of people who are dedicated to the same mission.
You have I'm not sure if it's a mission statement or it's just what you put in your material, make art anyway. Anyway,
right.
And I interpret it the second way because one of the things that happened, you mentioned this initially, Lisa, was that the schools, public schools, at least in Seattle, those are the only ones I'm familiar with, don't really have a whole lot of art anymore. And as the money dwindles, there's less art. So that was part of it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that was a late night brainstorming session. What's our tagline? But it has stayed such a symbolic tagline for lots of reasons. One, because it can interpret it a couple different ways. 2, because of the word make. One of the things we're hearing back from kids in these end-of-year evaluations is Arts Corps is where I make things. And make is truly a self-empowering thing to be able to do. And very rarely in schools are we asked to make anything. We're instead asked to repeat things and regurgitate what we are being told, what is right is wrong. And creation and making is so dynamic. And truly,
these are after-school programs. Clearly, it's which serve a myriad of functions. But when you think about art in specific, all the arts, I think that's such a loose term, art, and making things, how does that dovetail with what they're doing during the school hours, or is that not important?
It's not as important at the moment. One of the things that many people wanted us to quickly align ourselves with the WASL teaching standards and all the rest. And we did look at those and we said, yeah, these are what we're doing. But I was so adverse to starting an organization that was institutionally already constricted by another institution's expectations. I really think the power in Arts Course teaching is the emergent curriculum approach, which is first saying what are the kids interested in and bringing that out and helping that shape how they then are taken through the learning process and that they drive it as much as the teaching artist does.
And it's project oriented as well.
Right. And I think it's really a new and an alternative model. And so what I'd like to do is demonstrate that alternative model really has staying power and has legs in terms of where kids can change over time.
And we're seeing that already. I mean, even though we're primarily after school, we have a lot of in school, like in alternative schools like SUA. We just had a pilot at Rainier Beach High School. We had some kids in this class. The teachers of these kids were coming to the class to talk to the teacher and say, do you know that some of these students have been in their other classes more in the last 9 weeks since this program started than they have in the entire year? You know what I mean? And that's a pretty strong statement.
And I think when you ask, about how's it link, I think in the end, I saw that there was really no room within the school day to demonstrate this kind of alternative learning environment. It didn't seem to be happening. So this is a way to sort of demonstrate it from the outside and really illuminate the possibilities.
Well, it's interesting. One of the reasons I asked you this is that the Seattle Arts Commission, which is one of your public funders, specifically made the decision not to fund the Artists in the Schools program anymore,
right.
which it had funded, and is focusing on programs like Arts Corps. The district doesn't have money from any other source, really. So art, just let alone how it's taught, only exists in programs like this, and you're only available in certain areas at this point.
Right.
What kind of demand is there for you to expand?
Enormous.
I have a waiting list right now of 12 facilities, and everything from other YMCA programs done, like elementary schools that have everybody.
So in school and out of school, there's increasing demand. We have to be really careful, though, about how we expand after school or how we expand in school. After school, we just have to have the organizational capacity to handle it and make sure the quality of the programs remain top-notch, and we continue to do what we do. In school, it's going to require, there's some folks who want to start talking about some money that's available to do more in school, and it's a sizable chunk. And we're really going to recommend going slow. In the same way we approach the work with Arts Corps, really plan and pilot something on some small levels and see how it can work. And not assume or presume to be able to do too much too fast.
Yeah.
Seattle Arts Commission, one of the public funders, they're not huge, but just to go on your website, there are many foundations that have funded you, and now you're getting lots of pots of money from different places. This is only 4 years. I mean, there are organizations that wait 20 years to start getting this kind of attention. Why do you think Arts Corps has attracted that?
I think it's because of the way in which we combined kind of a political campaign mentality, which is what I bring, with really exceptional teaching and teaching artists, and a dedication to arts education. And the combination is very powerful. I mean, it sort of it gives the teaching and the arts education the engines and the credibility, frankly, that it needs to really be on the scene in a more powerful way. I also just think that the mission is ripe for fruition, and something about the climate right now is calling it forth. And not to sound too, out there, but I do really believe that that's true. And we were in the right place at the right time. I don't even remember, Susan Trapnell was the head of the Arts Commission at the time when I first started this, and Susan was extremely dedicated to pushing this because she saw how frustrating it was to be working in the schools. And she provided us some extraordinary seed money that enabled us to get going in ways that we never would have gotten going. And it was her kind of insight and vision and ability to say, I see that you have a really good plan. I like how you're approaching this, and I want to make this happen. So it was kind of luck and fate, and I think ultimately an incredible amount of dedication by a staff who said this is our life work.
You talked about project-based and making things, but you also have these, I think they're semester showcases.
Right.
There's one in the winter and there's one in the spring, and they're kind of, everybody gets to come out there and do their thing. And so clearly that's for the kids who are participating, but what does that do for the program, do you think?
Well, I think there's nothing like the energy that's generated in one of those nights. And when you walk in, especially what we're seeing, when we started out in this back room of the Speakeasy was our first showcase, and we just had one at the Rep, you know. And to watch this group of kids, I was just talking with Steve Sack, who's the coordinator at Concord Elementary, and he's like, you know, these kids have been doing it now for 2 years. They are in the loop. They're ready. They're thinking about it all quarter long. Like, what are we going to do for the showcase? And is this going to work? And it brings these kids who would never meet otherwise together in this very, you know, exciting state. Plus, the parents who get to really see their kids shine. Some parents who didn't even know that their children had these talents, and it's not just about the talent, it's about the opportunity to just say, do you see me? You know, just to be recognized.
And I think it's great to bring this community of people into venues like SAM, the Rep, Intiman. I mean, the list goes on, and many times never been to these places before. And they now refer to those places as the place where we did the Arts Corps showcase.
Right.
So they have a relationship to it. And I think it's a pride of ownership. It's a sense of accomplishment they would never get if they were just completing the class and doing performance at the, you know, Tukwila Community Center. It's a powerful
Well, you know,
it's community. It builds. It brings us together as a community.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned a while back, Amy, the teacher, I think was at Rainier Beach, who was talking about the kids attending class more. There are a lot of, I don't think there are studies, but there are a lot of programs that involve kids in art, mostly outside of school, and I'm thinking of Langston Hughes and Steve Sneed, who used to run that program. And I've heard these stories for years about what an arts program of any kind, drama, literature, does for the kid
How it impacts their
in school.
life.
So why do you think it is that yet again you're showing it that it's not, you know, meshing?
I think a lot of reasons. I mean, this gets at the kind of the meat of it for me as to why I'm doing this. I think arts education really helps anyone to be a free thinker and to ask a lot of questions about why things are or why they aren't. And it really turns the power dynamic a little bit on its head, because I think folks who are much more open to thinking about things more broadly and not necessarily accept anything that they are given will not just swallow bait and hook the general, the political status quo or what the media spews out, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think it's a threatening thing in some respects to cultivate a generation of artists, even if they aren't practicing artists, but they're people who, if we define it that way, free thinkers. And when I sometimes talk about Arts Corps, I talk about it as the revolution, because it's the way that we're gonna do that. And yet that's perhaps not the most. We also need to sort of stay under the radar for as long as we possibly can. Here we are saying it.
Yeah,
I know.
Thinking that.
But
Okay.
I think that I think it's important that people know that our mission is broader than just arts education, because we have an opportunity to perhaps really change the way our culture is going.
You worked in environmental
Yeah.
activism, I guess, for lack of a better term. And
Yeah.
so you talked about not wanting to be in politics. You didn't want to be in the established political arena,
Right.
because this is still political.
It's still
yeah?
political, but I tend
Certainly.
to keep it at arm's length. I don't get as involved, and there are groups in town, the Vera Project and some others, who are really successful and very good at working the political angles to their advantage, and it's great. It's great. My focus is that I really want to do the work. I'm really interested in the results. I want to show the results, and I want to be extraordinarily detailed about it so that I can convince as many people as possible. And insofar as I'm involved in politics, I want it to be because of the work that we do, and not necessarily for any other reason. I think ultimately there may be a time and a place where we might need to be more political, but for the moment we get so much of our funding from foundations, corporations, and individuals who have said, we like your mission, we see it, we sign on, here's the money.
Yeah,
which is great and liberating. And I think the more we can do that, the freer we are to sort of pursue the work.
And I think what's interesting about the whole political thing is that what I love the most about Arts Corps in terms of dealing with those waters is that on any day when that gets overwhelming, you can always go back to the youth. You know, I can walk into a classroom, I can get to a place where their art is. I remember, I can reconnect to why I came on in the first place, and that's very clean. It's very clean and it's very clear. And as long as you can hold the line of that, the motivation behind why we're here, which is to create opportunities for young people to speak their minds, to express themselves, and for us as adults and mentors to say, I see you. You know, the recognition of you as you stand, I see you. And that, no matter what happens, that's always available to us. And so it makes it easier to swim in those waters, I think.
Well, thanks, both of you. And I clearly, there's a road ahead, huh?
A long one.
A long one.
But we're in it for the long term. And there's nothing more satisfying than kind of finding your life's work and sort of saying that this is it without a doubt, and keep going. So,
Well, thank you.
thanks.
Thanks a lot.
All my niggas. Yeah. Mommy, I'm sorry, nowadays we rarely talk. I can understand the righteous path that you wanted me to walk. You wanted me to make something of myself, cause ain't nobody gonna love me like myself. Fell in love with a man mesmerized by his wealth. Mommy, I love you, and I wish that nigga never touched you. I trust you, put no one above you. Put my hands up high, mommy, I still love you. I'm not gonna give up, not like this. I can't go on, no, not like this. But I can't give up, no, not like this. I wish my love was sorta not like this. Not like this, not like this. Why my life gotta be like this? Not like this, not like this. Why my life gotta be like this?
It's the bitch when you're trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. Now that money paid rent and electricity at the same time. School was nothing. Mind frame on survival. If I don't hustle, I don't eat, no sleep. On top of that, niggas trying to put me to sleep. Had to make the 9 my wife, the dope my child. Mad cause my father wasn't there. Felt like the world didn't care. All they did was stare. Single mother stays